Welcome to this Euronet Plus debate on migration, presented within the Citizens Corner concept. The debate is produced and hosted by Euronet Plus and Radio Romania, a member of the Euronet Plus network. The debate can be followed live in the European Parliament on our Euronet Plus Inside website, on our Facebook profile, as well as on Twitter using the hashtag Citizens Corner. I'm Brian Maguire. Joining us today to discuss migration mayhem, Malin Bjork, a Swedish MEP with the European United Left, Julio Winkler, an MEP from Romania with the European People's Party, Timothy Kirkhope will be joining us shortly from the European Conservatives and Reformists, Dennis Binant, head of unit in charge of irregular migration and returns policy at the European Commission, and Aspasia Papadopoulou, senior policy officer with the European Council on Refugees and Exiles, my apologies, and Beatrice Bungo from Romania, one of our students, will join us later, as well as Aria Fernandez Novo from Spain. Welcome, all of you. Migration, people are probably tired of hearing about this, and yet it's the biggest issue on our agenda at the moment. What can we bring new to this discussion today? What is missing from the argument today? Julio?
Well, first of all, I think we have to be very specific and clear. Are we discussing refugees or are we discussing migration? Because that's a very important issue. It is important because we need a different set of tools when we discuss those, and it's important because when we look at our rules, I mean the European rules versus national member state rules, we have also to be very clear what we discuss. We discuss refugees, we discuss the situation in Syria and in the conflict areas. Do we discuss humanitarian aid? Do we discuss social necessities and so on? Or we discuss a phenomenon which is here to stay, because migration is the issue of the 21st century. It did not begin yesterday, and it will not end next week.
Okay, Malin, where should the focus be today?
Well, I think we need to have a big, very self-critical discussion about solidarity in the European Union. We have situations today with a humanitarian catastrophe, a political catastrophe, I would say also. We have people walking on the roads in Europe looking for refuge and protection. And we have seen some member states denouncing and denying people the right to seek asylum and to seek protection in Europe. We are a continent that should know what it means when people are out walking and seeking protection. So I think we need a deep discussion about that. We need to open up legal ways for asylum, and we have to have a permanent relocation mechanism. Instead, the Council have proven to be incapable of that. Instead, they focus on returns. I think that sends a very, very bad message to the people.
Dana, you're dealing with this issue day after day. Where is the Commission's focus at the moment?
The Commission's focus is on everything, because in a first phase we need to concentrate on saving lives at sea, because there are still very many trying to reach Europe's shores in search of safety here. Once we save them and bring them safely on the shores, we need to focus on bringing them to all the EU countries, because we cannot afford having a concentration of asylum seekers in just two countries which happen to be geographically closer to where the refugees come from. So focus at sea, focus on land with the distribution of asylum seekers and the fair distribution system within the EU, as my colleague said. And thirdly, we need to concentrate on the integration of the refugees, of those who stay in the EU, but we also need to concentrate on returning to their home countries those that do not have a right to stay in the EU. Because let's be clear, it must be a comprehensive policy. And in order to preserve the sustainability of the EU system for asylum, and in order to be able to provide protection to those that need it, we also need to be able to send home those that don't need it, and to provide alternative schemes for those who come to Europe in search of jobs.
Okay, Aspasia, where's your focus at the moment?
Well, our focus is on advocating for more legal channels to access Europe, because we believe, as Malin rightly said, that there is no use in having a wonderful asylum system if people cannot access it. And right now, the majority of the people arriving are from refugee-producing countries. They're fleeing conflict. It's clear we're talking about refugees. If there is no other way to get here, they will take the boat, they will arrive illegally. And what we want is for member states to give them the possibility to travel safely and legally.
Timothy Kirkhope has just joined us. Welcome, sir.
Hello, yes.
The focus that we should have on the migration crisis at the moment, where should our focus be?
Well, I think our focus has to be on a mixture of analysing precisely the causes of the movements of these people, so many. from so many different parts of the world, not just from one location. We have to look at systems, make sure our systems are in place to deal with them, both in a humane way, but also in a way which actually preserves the security of the European Union as well. And I think so far we have not done a particularly good job. And I think ultimately we have to make sure that the people who are coming to Europe, not only are they considered and categorized and looked after, but also that ultimately they are allowed to be in that part of Europe that is best and most suited for them when their applications are legitimized.
Okay, yesterday there was an announcement about an increase in the budget for migration as well. How is that going to be spent? Do you know?
I just have read the decision, and it's of course a mixture between operational funding, because we need funding for the agencies that have competencies in all these fields, and I will not read them out, of course. And of course we need amounts of money for humanitarian aid. And what is very important, we need some increased financing for external action, because we have to be present on the spot, we have to be present in the conflict areas, and it's of course the link that links immediate measures to more elaborate and long-term policies.
Okay, Dan, I want to ask you, why are we in this position right now? The Commission had the information, it had the predictions for several years now. Some of the political groups here were advocating that action had to be taken several years ago. We knew what was coming. Why has this crisis emerged at all?
Well, I think that, as Julie said, first of all, migration is part of our lives, part of history, and I think that the debate shouldn't and cannot be about how to prevent migration. The debate is about managing migration in the most sustainable way, combining the need of protection of some, the needs of jobs of others, and the needs of the European society. So it's not, let's say, intelligence about future developments that mattered, but the answer is to get to the mix of policies which takes all of this interest into account and which caters for the humanitarian needs, for the needs to address root causes, wars, poverties around Europe, and to get acceptance for a system which is fair within the EU confines in our policy.
Is this acceptance of the policy where everything has got stuck?
I wouldn't say that it got stuck. I think that our tools of last year weren't fit for the development of this year, and we're in the process of adapting them.
Okay. Ria, you have a question for the panel?
Will the economy be affected by helping them?
Okay, Timothy, the In campaign, Stuart Rose, he said today, in fact, migration has helped Britain. There's been no real negative impact from migration. How does migration affect the economy?
Well, I'm talking now as a former immigration minister in the UK, and I'm also the guy now who's got the report on relocation for the European Parliament. So I'm very interested in the subject. I'm interested also in Stuart Rose's comments, which I think in general I would support. I think that the UK, and I'm not talking for other countries, the UK has benefited enormously over the many, many years now from people who have come to the UK, bring their talents, bring their their whole approach to life and so on. It's actually made our society much richer. All I would say, however, is that we now have something of a chaotic situation where the sort of people who particularly Europe needs, including the UK, are being mixed in with a whole lot of other elements which we are not apparently at the moment able to determine or able to separate. And you must have, at the end of the day, those that argue that everybody can enter the European Union who wants to, for whatever reason it might be. That, I'm afraid, is what leads to not only chaos, it also leads to considerable tensions and difficulties in terms of handling these things in society as a whole. And my view is immigration is an important tool, but it has to be fair, it has to be firm, it has to be subject to rules, and where humanitarian aid has to be given through refugee arrangements, that has to be done under the rules of the United Nations and not under any new rules that people might cook up.
Okay, Mel, how does migration affect the economy?
Well, I think I'm from Sweden, and it's the figures and the research are very unanimous. It has been a win for Sweden to have quite a lot of migrants and asylum seekers. So it's all positive. Today, Sweden and Germany are the countries that are welcoming most refugees per capita today, and of course it's putting a lot of pressure on the reception facilities, and there is an ongoing debate in Sweden. And I think that little debate in Sweden, I would say, also mirrors what needs to be done at European level. Every local community has to chip in. Every local community. So at EU level, what it means, and I think citizens understand this, means that all EU countries have to chip in. Everyone. This is extraordinary. We have a conflict in our neighborhood, and people are fleeing. We have to be able to step into that space of responsibility as the European Union. And I think citizens have shown the way. They have shown that we should welcome refugees. There's an extraordinary mobilization in several countries. And I think it's also an opportunity to say, back off to the extreme right. They have been instrumentalizing migrants and refugees long enough. Their racism has nothing to do with the Europe that we want to build together. And so we should just, stop them and stop blurring security issues with migration issues. That is their agenda, it is not ours.
Okay, Aspasia, from the migrants and the refugees' perspective, what do they need when they arrive in Europe?
They need support immediately, but more importantly, they need a future. They need to be able to contribute, and they're very eager to contribute. And for this, they need integration support services. And some countries have migration traditions, so they have services and structures in place. And some others are less experienced, and they need to pick up on that. Now, integration is a national competence, and it comes down to the member states to, develop the plan they want. But what we really want to see is member states to engage in this more actively, because everybody's talking about arrivals right now. But more important is what comes 3-6 months down the line, when people will be staying, they need a house, they need a school, they need a job. They need to be active contributors in society and feel valued in order to contribute as well to the economy and everything that was mentioned already.
Okay, Julio, did the Commission really mishandle this with the fixed quotas and the insistence that member states just had to do it whether they liked it or not? Was this politically botched?
Yes, deeply. Deeply. It was a deep mishandling, not by the Commission only, but by the Council of Ministers categorically, because this is such an important issue, and as just it was said before, member states have different integration experiences. Member states have different background. When you call for solidarity, that's a very good sign that you have already given or shared solidarity. So I think those decisions are not the type of decisions that have to be taken by majority vote. No. Those are the decisions that have to be discussed, that have to be debated. If it takes 5 days more, if it takes 1 week more, we are already so late that I don't think that 1 week matters. One discussion matters, one more consensus-seeking matters. So I think that in future one very important element would be that all those decisions that concern this very, very unusual situations, maybe for some member states those are a way of life for 2 centuries. Maybe for other member states there are something very new and unexpected, and those decisions I think that have to be taken by consensus, not by majority.
Okay,
vote.
Timothy, was the UK treated fairly in this?
By whom?
By the Commission, by the Council, given that UK was supporting Syria with large amounts of money, but getting a tough report when it came to accepting migrants?
Well, I mean, this is a world where you have to put up with criticisms from time to time. I'm sure we're quite capable of doing that in the UK. But I would just say, let me just say there that the UK, I think, has been very positive. I mean, there's arguments saying, you're not taking enough people. The truth of the matter is that Prime Minister's view was, and I think he's right about this, is that whatever we do about those people who have arrived in Europe, and we have to obviously deal with them through relocation issues and so on. But whatever you do about that, you need to go nearer to the source of their anguish and source of their problems. We do need to have, and the Commission and others are now talking about it. I mean, Mr. Juncker's talking about it. Everybody's talking about it. possibility of giving them some kind of protection closer to the places where they have had their lives disrupted. That must be the key to this, because if you do that, then also you give more comfort to the European nations. Rather than being set upon and told what they have to do, they're then part of what I think is a much more positive approach in a place which does not give the social difficulties or social crises which we're seeing in a number of European countries over this issue now, and indeed affecting negatively race relations, because undoubtedly it is, and it's playing into the hands of extremists, and if you do that, then it means that democratic governments can lose even more control.
Melon.
Well, two things. On the issue of who are we going to adapt to, how are we going to deal with it in the council? I'm worried that the council had been stalled, had been having to adapt to the least common denominator. And if Mr. Orban, I'm sorry, is the least common denominator, we are not well off in this union. He is closing the borders. He's not respecting, be it media freedom or human rights. That is not the way to go. So I think sometimes consensus can be good, but sometimes you have to acknowledge that it's not possible, and you have to move forward in face of a humanitarian crisis. When it comes to the issue of making sure that the European Union and individual member states, and indeed the UN, takes a greater action and responsibility to support refugees in the areas close to the Syrian conflict, for example, I think that is a very, very important issue. But I see also the kind of actions that are being put in place today, with accepting from Mr. Erdogan, from Turkey, behavior that we should actually be criticizing Turkey on human rights and media freedoms. But we are remaining quiet on that, as long as we're saying you just stop migrants and refugees from coming to Europe. And I think that is not the way to go for Europe. It doesn't increase our credibility.
Okay, Dana, do you think that the political credibility is being diminished by this grand compromise, or should the European Union, should the Commission in particular, take a really technocratic view of what needs done?
I don't think that the Commission takes a technocratic view of what needs to be done, nor should it take a technocratic view, because what we are dealing with is a tremendous society issue which we need to address. And I don't think that technocratic solutions are fit for that, because the debate is very big. The debate is about how open are we to migration, how open and how do we organize solidarity, how open are we to legal migration, and what is our relationship with our neighbours, basically, and how do we deal with poverty, how do we support UN institutions. So I don't think that there are technocratic solutions for this, nor should there be.
Okay, Arya, you have another question?
Yeah, which migrants will be beloved for the refugee?
Sorry, repeat the question?
Which migrants will be
Okay.
developed for the refugee?
Spasia, how should we measure the influx of refugees in terms of allocation? Where should they go, and how should we allocate budget to support them?
All things being equal, if there was a uniform status across the Union, let's say, and people could get asylum in one country and that is actually recognized in all member states and would have the same treatment, the same rights, they would still go to certain member states and not to others. And this is, of course, because of the labor markets, of the welfare state, of family ties and so on. So it's inevitable that many people will go to some places and less people will go to others. This, however, should not be used as an argument to distribute people, because obviously we're talking about solidarity here. We're facing a crisis, and as Malin said, the point here is about member states joining forces to address the challenges together. There is a mechanism that was established now and agreed for the relocation scheme, which intends also to become a permanent mechanism once adopted, and that would be a way to distribute. But this is only for the emergency support to the points of arrival. At the same time, there's of course the need for member states to take their equal share in the resettlement of people already outside the Union. And there, of course, there are no binding quotas. Each member state makes its own offer. But we would like to see, whether mandatory or not, we would like to see greater offers, more places.
Sven on Facebook, he writes, where is the European spirit when we speak of sharing the burden? Some states are ready to receive the EU funds, but not the refugees, even if they're part of the Schengen area. Julio, this is a story which has really come up the last few weeks, is that, yeah, we'll take the refugees, but you have to pay us to do it. Is that right?
I think that it's also about information and public information, also about opinion and of course freedom of opinion. But what kind of opinions, what kind of stereotypes are spread through the internet and so on? I think there is many misinterpreted and enhanced.
So political
artificially
messaging is
enhanced.
wrong.
Of course, and if we speak about extremes, we speak about demagogues, we speak about anti-Europeans and so on, they have a fertile ground, and not only the extreme right, because the extreme left is taking its energy from the same ground. Just remember the moment and the picture when communist revolutionary Prime Minister Tsipras entered the House of the European Parliament. The extreme left and the extreme right were applauding together, and they were on their feet. So I think that it's very clear that we have the same types of reactions, and I think, of course, that we have to judge on factual basis if we want to judge at all.
Malin, maybe you have a comment.
Well, I think that Mr. Winkler's little speech here to some sad extent demonstrates one of the problems in this house, that if you cannot see difference between a nationalist, racist, extreme right and an international solidarity-based left, then of course we do have problems in this house. And Tsipras or any other left government, and I hope there will be more, will of course not need the extreme right to support them. The thing is that the left is today the ones that are challenging Fortress Europe. We are saying we should not embark on an extreme return policy or building more barbed wire around EU external borders, as long as we have not sat down and agreed on legal asylum ways. In a way, how are we going to replace Dublin by a permanent relocation mechanism, for example? We want that discussion. We don't want more repressive policies, we want more of EU solidarity.
Timothy, the political messaging first in this. How should this be remessaged, repackaged?
First of all, I've got no time for either the extreme left or the extreme right.
Even within your own party?
Most of our problems, I'm not really sure about extreme right in my own party, but the thing is, any extremes in politics bother me, actually, and the answer to all the problems, including problems like this, is not to attach any kind of extremism of one kind or the other. I think they're both equally awful. But what we need to do is be pragmatic and practical, as well as the humanitarian side, which is always essential. We have to be practical about this, and therefore, as we look ahead into the more permanent relocation arrangements, we have really got to not just simply talk about where we put people, and this arbitrary approach, which I don't think necessarily always reflects the needs of the people we're dealing with. We also have to look at responsibility, and we have to look at the future and how we actually put something in place which provides a more permanent and a more organized approach to this. Yes, there are terrible things going on in the world in a number of countries where instability is clear. We have to look at that point and see how we can restore stability. We also have to look as if we can continue to give aid and help from Europe, which is a rich part of the world, to those parts of the world that currently, where people have really seriously bad economic experiences and so on, and all that. But this has got to be done in a much wider, but also in, I'm afraid, a cooler way than some people actually reacting to this at the moment.
Dan, isn't the problem that many people see the Commission is just too cool on this, that they're not doing enough, that they really need to have a quicker heartbeat with this? We see even President Obama last week as well saying, we can crowdfund some of the support for this. They're looking at every option possible to get the money, to get the response. What should the Commission be doing which it isn't doing right now?
Well, that's for the others to tell me. I think the Commission is doing a lot and at a rhythm which is unprecedented. Well, let's be very clear. Since the unfolding of this crisis, the response has been, I think, proportionate to the magnitude of the crisis. The Commission put forward the European Agenda on Migration, which for the first time puts together all aspects of managing migration comprehensively, irregular migration, legal migration, asylum, as well as borders. Then it put forward 2 weeks afterwards an implementing package with a number of proposals, including an action plan on smuggling, proposals on relocation, covering again all aspects. Several months later, in September, it put forward a second package of implementing measures with proposals to relocate a further 120,000, with a proposal for permanent relocation mechanism, an action plan on
But most
return.
people say it's too little. Each time it's too little and it doesn't get to solving the problem. I'll come to Mel in just a moment. I want to bring up the issue of Donald Tusk and George Soros, both credible characters on the political sphere and both further to the centre-right, and both saying this can really destroy the European Union. Are they right?
I think that we are living a sort of age of scenarios, and of course that if somebody makes the argument that the European Union is at crossroads, I think it is, and some decisions have to be made. Some decisions are not simple. So, of course, then one has to deeply analyze. We are discussing about friends of the European Union or maybe foes of the same entity, and that's not so easy to tell with certain entities and with certain individuals, be they very widely known individuals. Yes, if you remember 5 years ago, everybody was at the brink of the collapse of the Eurozone. And the European Union found the solution. And yes, those solutions were the mainstream solutions, I mean, coming from the mainstream part of the politics, not from the extreme one or the other. Then last year we were discussing in an extraordinarily with an extraordinary urgency with the Grexit issue. Greece has to leave, Greece has to go, and Greece did not leave neither the Eurozone nor the European Union, nor will, for that matter, Britain. I'm very optimistic for this, and problems will get their solution. Dialogue and seeking consensus will bring results. So this is the situation for the present challenge also, I believe.
Okay, Malin, on Syria, how much has Syria messed up a solution? Because now we have Russia coming into this, we have Iran in the mix as well. We're trying to manage a nuclear deal at the same time. We have gas coming from Russia. And how complicated is this going to get a year from now as well?
Well, I think the situation is extremely complicated, but I do think that we need a solution where we focus on negotiations. And I think Obama again has said that they want to take a lead. They want to negotiate. I think the European Union have to also be able, and individual member states have to step in behind and make sure there is no military solution. There is no military solution, and that goes for the conflict between Russia and Ukraine also. So we have to be very much more focused on that. I come from a country that's a large arms exporter, Sweden, per capita, I mean. And UK and France and other countries, Italy as well. So, and I think we have some self-criticism to do there also. And so who is supplying the arms for all these conflicts? Some of us are guilty in that respect. I think in terms of the question about the European Union, maybe Mr. Kirkhope and I can agree actually that in the sense from the Swedish left, we do not think that the EU is the solution to all of the things that fall upon on our tables. And I think the EU, together with a stronger involvement by the UN in managing the refugee crisis, would be more of a successful match, maybe.
Okay, Timothy Kirkhope, on the UN, it seems the UN has been largely left out of this. It's on the edges, and now we're starting to talk about supporting UN projects, and particularly on North Africa. Why was the UN not a key partner at the beginning of this, and why is it only now being discussed as a global problem?
I don't really know. Actually, I'm very worried about being equated to be working with the Swedish left.
Can't you get all your
friends? It's a new one for me, really. But can I just say about the UN? When we had the Balkans problem back in the 90s, I was responsible for the UK's involvement in the United Nations program for resettlement of Bosnian refugees. It was very successful. I think all of us worked very hard right across Europe in terms of taking numbers of refugees at that time under United Nations auspices. And I actually think that in this particular area, the United Nations is very well equipped to do this. And that's another reason, incidentally, why I believe that a lot of our help and our aid and interest should be taken forward to the areas where people are being assembled by the United Nations under their own protection, closer to where the conflicts are, rather than having people risking their lives, losing their lives, struggling to get to Europe with an uncertain future then as well.
Aspasia, do you think that UN should be more fundamentally linked to what Europe's doing right now?
Well, I'm not quite sure I agree with the fact that it's not been involved so far. I mean, the UNHCR and all the UN agencies are implementing all the European Union funding right now in the region. And they are actually supporting the resettlement operation as it works, the protection capacities and everything. But when it comes to resettlement, was just mentioned, it does come down to the countries to make the offer and receive the people. And the UN is only supporting, providing the services to just support the operation. So it's not really, there is no decision-making role there, and there is no role other than supporting the states. So I would really bring this back to the European member states and their political will.
Okay, Dana, Germany will probably take in 1 million asylum seekers this year. How many of them will actually be allowed to stay is another question, but 1 million. I asked Jonathan Portes, one of the leading statisticians in the UK, how many people the UK could annually absorb successfully, and he said about 1 million, but 1 million is a safe number to that year on year, which I find surprising. But he's looking at it from a purely academic point of view, and like Timothy was saying, the vast majority of these people contribute. They're low cost in terms of remaining within the country as well. Why can't the Commission get this message through to member states?
I think the Commission is trying very hard to tell the member states that the refugees coming to Europe are a chance. Well, first of all, it is a duty for us to take them in, so we do not even think of economic advantages or further advantages that we may get from the presence of these refugees in society. But beyond that, they do represent a chance. First of all, we do have labour market gaps, and this is one of the good things about the European Agenda on Migration. It puts together the needs and the problems that we have and challenges that we have in irregular migration, with those on legal migration, with those on asylum, and with those on borders. So there is a big opportunity to match some of the gaps in the labour market with the refugees coming to Europe. But I think that the debate should be disconnected, because first we have a duty to protect those that need protection. So that should be what inspires us to bring them to Europe and to bring them shield here. And secondly, yes, we I think are about to thrive in Europe economically from the presence of labour force.
Julio, two things on this. First of all, politicians generally aren't trusted on this issue, on the messaging. No offense, personally. But business has a better reputation. So what role does business have to play in terms of the messaging, in terms of the reality of the contribution migrants make? And secondly, what can business do to integrate migrants into the workforce?
Well, first of all, I think it's very important to speak out, not only for business, but for the NGOs, also for the civil society. I think for all segments of society, it's even for politicians. It's important to speak out and to have a dialogue. And then, once again, I will come back to the differences between different European societies, because there are societies for which receiving of migrants, of people is something which is part of the everyday life, maybe for 200 or 300 years, and there are other societies which have not been in this position. And also there are societies which maybe, forgive me for saying this, are used to measure economic effects of incoming people, and maybe there are other societies which are not so used to those issues. But I think that maybe eventually in future, if we debate and if we go on the European way, I mean on the common approach, I think that maybe immigration policies based on certain criteria, I speak now not about refugees but about migration, maybe something like this has to be elaborated.
Okay, we're coming close to the end of the program, so I'm going to ask each of you for a short response to this question. And Julio explained, we were dealing with the bank crisis, then we went to the Greek crisis, now we're dealing with migration. We've kind of fixed some of the other stuff. It's still there, but it's not. So if I say to you 5 years from now, Malin, where do you think we'll be with migration?
Well,
short answer.
Yeah, well, I hope that the politicians have listened to the call from citizens around Europe that want to construct something together, and that means that refugees are welcome. Europe is a society or based of different societies, but that actually manage together and shoulder to shoulder that we face that challenge together, and that we responded by opening Europe up, by opening ways for legal asylum ways, by cancelling Dublin, and by putting money into integration policies rather than Fortress Europe policies.
Dana.
I do hope that in 5 years we will have an integrated number of refugees who have enjoyed protection. All those who need it and sought it in Europe enjoyed protection. They're well integrated, contributing to society, and that those that do not have a right to be in Europe and who reach it irregularly are sent back home, so that to learn that they shouldn't buy the services of smugglers to reach Europe, and that they should apply to jobs in Europe through legal migration ways, which would be by then in place.
Timothy, 5 years now, where are we going to be with migration?
Well, I hope we're going to put ourselves in a little more order than we are right now. And in that way, I think it's very important that we actually start to debate what Europe's needs are going to be in relation to those who wish to come on an economic basis, who wish to come and actually use the immigration rules. We need to be sure we know what Europe wants. And Europe is a competitive part of the world. It's developing. It needs to look ahead in that way. And I think also, we have got to make it clear that we do not tolerate, however else people might come to Europe, we do not tolerate criminality. We must deal with criminals and show that they are not to be a major feature of future immigration policies.
Okay, Julio.
Well, I think that we have to remember the soul of Europe, that first of all. But we cannot do poetry here because we have to have rules. So I hope that in 5 years from now we will have much more efficient common rules for those issues that we want to solve in common at European level. Those rules have to work and have to be implemented, and we have to be sure that everybody will implement in the same way the common rules. As for the elements that we choose to maintain at national level, okay, no problem, let's maintain them, but let's avoid the chaos. For the moment we are in a little bit of chaos, and I hope that in 5 years from now this will not be the case anymore.
Okay, Esposito.
I hope that in 5 years from now we will look back and say this was the moment that changed mindsets. This was the moment that changed policies. And actually, we developed solidarity mechanisms at the European Union level, and where politicians also saw migrants and refugees as people that contribute and not as criminals.
Aria.
I agree with her, and I'm very happy to stay here today. And for me, it's very important to stay with our people here.
Okay, so what we're getting to now is the moment when Europe must decide what it stands for. Does it stay with the notion of a member state which has the right to decide pretty much what it wants to do, or does Europe move forward into a deeper level of integration with respect for member states in a way which isn't done today, perhaps? Refugees or migration, there's a difference in the tools which are necessary to solve this problem. Solidarity is a self-critical condition, and Europe must be paying more attention to those that are walking along the roads of Europe, reminiscent of the Second World War. Also, the process is lives at sea, then safe to shore, and then returns to home country where necessary, legal routes which are accessible, an analysis of the causes fixed within the global context, not just within the European context, and the operational funding, humanitarian aid, the two areas which need a lot of attention at the moment, the personnel required to do this. Part of life. Migration is not something new. It is part of Europe's history and part of something which is much bigger than the moment that we're living today. The benefits of immigration must be more loudly declared. People need to understand what migration contributes to the European way of life, and the locality, the responsibility of every locality in Europe to play its part. The political messaging, which has been so turbulent of recent times, not least because of the actions of Viktor Orban in Hungary, Hungary, that Europe is at a crossroads. We have learned from previous experiences in Bosnia, the role of the UN, how we can work together with the UN, but today we're fighting for the soul of Europe, which may find itself described in terms of common rules 5 years from now, but this is the moment where Europe decides. Let me thank our guests today, Malin Bjork, Julio Winkler, Timothy Kirkhope, Dennis Benant, Aspazia Papadopoulou, and Beatrice Bungo and Ria Fernandez Novo also. Thank you to all of you for your time today.